In the line of sight, Floridians prepare for Hurricane Milton. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
Deeper than the headlines.
The answers you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
Bracing for Milton. Hurricane Milton is about to bear down near Tampa and St. Petersburg, Florida. It has weakened somewhat, but is still expected to be a powerful Category 3 hurricane when it makes landfall late tomorrow night. The governor of Florida is Ron DeSantis, and he warned the public today, don't rely on the cone.
Hurricane Milton is still a major hurricane. It is no longer a Category 5, but it potentially could strengthen back to that as it makes its approach to the state of Florida. Maximum sustained winds are in excess of 150 miles an hour. Now, their forecasts do call for it to weaken before it gets to landfall, and maybe that's true. Let's hope it's true. Maybe it's not, but even if it does weaken, you're still looking at a major hurricane. It is going to have really, really significant impacts. Right now, it's located about 560 miles southwest of Tampa.
Milton could be packing wind speeds of 111 to 129 miles per hour or 180 to 210 kilometers per hour. It is hoped the current track will see the storm spare other states that were just ravaged by Hurricane Helene. The death toll from that hurricane stands at 230 from Florida to the Carolinas. The mayor of Tampa is Jane Castor. She warned residents, get out or you're going to die.
Helene was a wake-up call. This is literally catastrophic. And I can say without any dramatization whatsoever, if you choose to stay in one of those evacuation areas, you're going to die.
In advance of the storm making landfall, some counties in Florida have closed schools for the rest of the week. Sarasota County, for example, says it's closed all of its schools and they won't reopen until officials deem it safe to do so. At a briefing today, Governor DeSantis outlined some of the other preparations underway.
We are currently fulfilling close to 1,000 missions to support our local communities. That includes everything from tiger dams and generators to staff support, as well as food and water and tarps. We've also deployed more than 11,000 feet of flood protection systems, and we're prioritizing critical infrastructure like hospitals, wastewater treatment facilities, and electrical infrastructure. We've also done things like generators to support special needs sheltering operations. Of course, Starlink Internet. All counties have access to Starlink Internet devices and can use those as they see fit. More than 350 ambulances and more than 30 paratransits are in operation. We also have another 144 in staging that can be used if the need arises. The state of Florida is amassing fuel reserves ahead of Milton and staging it to be utilized as needed. We have been dispatching fuel over the past 24 hours as gas stations have run out.
Emergency officials in Hillsborough County held an update today. That county includes Tampa, but also smaller cities like Temple Terrace. The mayor of Temple Terrace is Andy Ross. He is urging residents to look out for each other.
Look out for each other now, right? So we're 3 or 4 days into nonstop, terrifying messages to the public, right? Get out. If you don't get out, you're likely to be injured or killed, or your house is going to be destroyed. And so day after day after day of this takes a mental strain on people. This is really stressful for a lot of people. So look out for each other. I think it was mentioned, check on your neighbors, call your friends, make sure they have what they need, stay in touch. Look out for each other, because even if your home is fine, even if everything is fine, the mental health impact of this can be catastrophic. And so I would recommend that you check social media or check the website, the Hillsborough County Emergency Operations or Emergency Management. Stay informed, but don't just leave the television on watching this 24/7 nonstop, right? That is not mentally healthy. So check it every hour, every 2 hours when the updates come out. Stay informed. I'm not telling you to just hibernate, but stay informed, but turn the television off in between those updates, right? It is not healthy to just sit there 24/7 and listen to this kind of stuff.
Tampa hasn't been in the direct path of a major hurricane in over a century, and the region's population has exploded in recent years. Tens of thousands of Americans moved to the area during the pandemic, and many chose to settle along barrier islands like Clearwater and St. Petersburg. More than 50,000 people moved to the area just between 2022 and 2023. Dave Kerner is with the Florida Highway Patrol. He told news reporters today 2,000 state troopers are at the ready. So are thousands of members of the National Guard and State Guard, and they will all be doing proactive patrols.
Decide what's best for your family. The governor has said and reiterated that it's your decision. But if you're in an evacuation zone, please heed the warnings and direction of your local government and make that decision. Whatever your decision is, don't hesitate in that decision. So today is an important day to execute on the plans to make sure that you and your family are safe. If you are going to evacuate, and if you're considering doing that, please do not be concerned about the potential loss of property, theft, or looting. We spoke yesterday about how the Florida Highway Patrol, the National Guard, the State Guard, FWC, are all engaged in proactive patrol to make sure that if you're evacuating, that your property is safe, that your home is safe, and that's one less thing that you have to worry about. You should be focused on evacuating safely and preparing for the storm.
Forecasters are warning of a possible 8 to 12-foot storm surge in Tampa Bay. That is the highest ever predicted for that location, and it is nearly double the levels reached just 2 weeks ago during Hurricane Helene. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
A warning about Trump and tariffs and an economy that relies too much on housing. We're going to talk about both of those issues this week with Professor Ian Lee. Back from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University, and it's great to hear from you.
My pleasure, Rob. It's always good to speak to you about these very timely and important issues.
Yeah, it's meaty stuff today. We have this report from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce that warns that a second Trump presidency could mean more U.S. protectionism. It could mean tariffs that cost Canadians an average of $1,100 a year. Real incomes would decline. Labor productivity would fall in this country. So look, the Americans, I think, are going to want some concessions from Canada in the next round of free trade talks. What do we have to offer?
Well, I'll take that question first then, if you want to deal in sort of in reverse order.
Sure.
I've been reading every year. The Americans are very transparent, by the way. Some people say we don't understand what they want. I don't know why people even say that. The U.S. Trade Rep, USTR, publishes every year a report to the tabled in Congress that lists the trade irritants by country with the rest of the world. It's alphabetical, so it's nice and simple. Country A, B, C, you go down to the C's, and there's China and Canada. Oh, my goodness. It's about 10 pages. And it lists the trade irritants and why they're a trade irritant. They're not just throwing things out there. They say, here are the following things. This is what this country is doing. This is why it's hurting us, and this is why we don't like it. Completely transparent. And for years and years, they've been listing, guess what? Dairy, telecom, all the protected industries, because it keeps Americans out. It violates the spirit of NAFTA. And so I've been arguing, we are playing with fire. We, Canada, are playing with fire because, first off, anytime you protect any industry, you end up screwing and exploiting your own people. That's what protectionism does. It's to benefit the elites in that industry, the shareholders and the union bosses in that industry, and at the expense of everybody else, because the protectionism, the higher prices you pay, falls on the consumers in that country. But more than that, what we're doing is alienating our most important trading partner on planet Earth. This is not just another country. 3/4 of all our trade is with the United States.
Sure.
And so this is just incredibly stupid.
Okay, so stupid, okay. Well, maybe stupid on steroids. Let me just jump in there. because, you know, one of the Bloc's demands right now to support the Liberals is to protect supply management in any free trade negotiation. There's actually a bill in the Senate about it right now.
Yeah.
With all party support, by the way. It's not that any of the political parties are rushing to, quote unquote, sell out our dairy farmers. I mean, you think that is irresponsible, I would suspect.
Beyond irresponsible.
Right?
First off, let's put some numbers on so that these politicians cannot get away with deceiving us yet again. We're talking less than 10,000 dairy farmers in a country of 40 million. When supply management was introduced by Pierre Elliott Trudeau in his government in 1971, there were 150,000 dairy farmers in Canada, and it was brought out the, quote, save the dairy farmers. And in the subsequent years of supply management, they lost 140,000 dairy farmers. Now, it wasn't just because of supply management. There were other reasons, too, consolidation and so forth. But nobody can argue that supply management kept the population at 150. We're now down to 8,000. I think it's 8,500 dairy farmers, and they're overwhelmingly located in Ontario and Quebec. They're a tiny, tiny, tiny number. There's 41 million Canadians. And what's happening is these farmers are being bought out by big agricultural corporations. So increasingly what we're doing is we're subsidizing agricultural corporations. So on every dimension, first off, it doubles the price. The prices are 50% higher than if there was no supply management. And secondly, we're supporting increasingly agricultural corporations. And thirdly, we're annoying the Americans no end. There is no benefit, none for Canada. None.
All right. So this figure then, $1,100 a year. I mean, how do you arrive at that number? Do you think it's from Trevor Tombe from the University of Calgary?
I read the executive summary of his report. It only came out today. But what he's done, and there's a very well-developed methodology to evaluate the impact of tariffs in econometrics. I'm not an econometrician. I'm not an economist. I'm a public policy guy. The methodology is there, and basically what it does is because tariffs fall on the customers of that country. So tariffs on Americans by American government will fall on American consumers. But it will also impose costs on Canadians because it reduces the exports from Canada to the U.S. So there's a double whammy. There's the whammy, the impact, the negative impact that it reduces the jobs in Canada from those industries because they're now subject, their sales go down. So the exports go down, so there's going to lead to a loss of jobs. On the other side, on the American side, on the consumption side, because they're the importer, if we're just talking about them importing, they're paying more for the same good than before. So it is lose, 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 lose all the way. And it doesn't benefit anybody.
Okay, in a minute or less, do you think this is just something to worry about if Trump wins, or should we be worried if Harris wins as well?
I think it's more, I think that we have to worry about both of them because the Democratic Party actually has historically been much more protectionist than Republicans. That's not to defend the Republicans. We should be very worried about Trump. And we should be worried, not as much, but still be worried about the Democrats. The one quick thing, though, he may be doing this as to squeeze us to the negotiating table in a new, because we have to negotiate a new CUSMA in 2026. So it's coming down the pipe whether we like it or not. And it'll be ironic, very quickly, Rob, it'll be really ironic if it's Donald Trump that forces us to give up the protectionism of those industries that end up exploiting Canadian consumers. So maybe Donald Trump's going to save us from ourselves.
Okay. When we come back, is the Canadian economy too dependent, reliant on real estate activity or economic growth? We'll ask the professor about that. There's been some studies about that. We'll ask him about it. When we come back, I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues
on News Radio.
Back with Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Let's talk a little bit about real estate, okay? Yeah. And this question, is Canada's economy too dependent on housing activity for economic growth? So there was a report out earlier this year. There have been similar reports. This one was done by Alberta Central, which is kind of the central banker to the credit unions in Alberta. It's a financial institution. And the chief economist there said this: Canadians currently spend as much per year as a share of GDP on renovations and home ownership transfer costs. So you think getting the real estate agent, doing the home inspection, hiring the lawyer, all that stuff. They spend as much per year as a share of GDP on renovations and home ownership transfer costs as they do on machinery, equipment, and intellectual property. And the argument is made that the country is investing more in less productive investments than improving the stock of capital. So what do you think about that and about this trend? Because it's certainly been in place for a while now.
Right. I'm very loath to criticize economists because I do respect them. I think that economists have very strong methodologies as a general statement about economics and the discipline. This is one area where I think and this, I know this sounds arrogant, okay, forgive me, because I'm not an economist. I was in banking for 9 years, lent millions of dollars of real estate, so I think I really understand this business better than most economists because I did it. I did it. I actually lent millions of dollars on real estate.
Okay.
But this is one area where I think the economists have misunderstood causality. Let me explain that. The argument is we're spending huge amounts on real estate. We are, by the way. And so I said, okay, maybe that's because we just, quote, own too much real estate, you know? So I looked up this database, website from associated with Oxford, home ownership by country. There's countries in the world, Romania 95%, Slovakia 92%, Russia 89%. It just goes on and on and on. Very, very, very high levels of ownership. It's not the level of ownership. What these people who are saying this, and by the way, Rosenberg, the very distinguished economist in Toronto makes this argument too. Way over-investing, Canadians, bad, we're over-investing in real estate, residential real estate we're talking.
Yeah.
And the reason is what they're getting mixed up, and I say this very respectfully because Rosenberg's a top-notch economist. So again, I keep apologizing for criticizing.
Okay. But
they're confusing the fact that because our municipalities have socially engineered, as I've said many, many times, talking to you and many other people, they've socially engineered shortages. It's not an accident for people who say it's a natural thing. In the States, you can buy, in my sister's state of Arizona, you can buy a 4-bedroom house, single-family home in Tucson, Arizona, in the 4s. Not in the millions, in the 400s.
Right.
Okay? So where I'm going with this, Rob, is we're spending, quote, over-investing in real estate not because of the rate of home ownership in Canada, but because the individual houses have become so
policies have been too restrictive
because of bad government policies in our country, where the major cities in the country, the largest cities, the GTAs, the Vancouvers, the Ottawas, very deliberately said, we don't want to build lots of new houses on the edges of cities like we've done for thousands of years. That's urban sprawl. That's bad. So they have deliberately restricted the supply of housing, creating shortages that drove the cost up, that meant the ownership percentage hasn't basically changed in this country. But we're spending a lot more because the average house has become much more expensive. This is a pricing problem, if I can call it that.
Pricing problem. Okay, interesting.
Because of government.
All right. Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. I'd like to pick up on that conversation some other time. Thank you so much, Professor. We'll speak soon.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business. That's Carleton University in Ottawa. Our Newsday panel just ahead. This is News Radio.
You have questions.
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
On News Radio. The Newsday panel.
And our Newsday panelists today include Josie Sabatino, back from Summa Strategies. Hello, Josie.
Good afternoon, Rob. Thanks for having me.
It's great to hear from you. And Jordan Paquette from Blue Sky Strategy Group. So we have the West and the East well taken care of today. Josie from British Columbia, Jordan from Prince Edward Island. So we're a pan-Canadian panel today. I will just note that there is a Pierre Poilievre news conference. He has people scheduled a news conference for 12:30 Eastern time. It is now 12:34 Eastern time. It has yet to begin. We don't know what it's about. We may listen to some of that and ask for some instant reaction from our panelists. We are monitoring it, so to speak. You never know. These things can be adventurous from time to time. Pierre Poilievre in the news media. Pierre Poilievre versus the news media. Will he come out and chew an apple? Will he come out and chew somebody out? You just never know. But I want to pick up on a conversation that we were having with Professor Ian Lee just before the news. This report from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce warning about a Trump presidency and the possibility for tariffs that could cost each Canadian $1,100 a year. I think protectionist measures should be anticipated no matter who wins the U.S. presidential election. But what sectors or industries in the Canadian economy might be vulnerable right now because of the U.S. political situation? Josie?
Two that immediately come to mind are steel and aluminum and softwood lumber. I mean, we saw under a Trump presidency how volatile he can be when it comes to trade policies, and he's already threatened tariffs. So we know that if he is elected in November, that is coming down the pipe. So that's one to watch. And then ongoing, we have this dispute with softwood lumber. Consecutive governments have sought to get this remedied, and it remains a very big hindrance. So I think no matter what the outcome of the presidential election is, that one needs to be solved for, and it will be top of mind, I think, for Canadian officials who are trying to navigate some of the complexities.
Okay. What do you see as potentially vulnerable sectors or industries in the Canadian economy right now when it comes to U.S.-Canada trade, Jordan?
Yeah, certainly agree. Softwood lumber has been that ongoing irritant. Canada still hasn't been able to get resolutions to it lately. I know Stephen Harper made some progress on it previously, but we're still not there yet. Agriculture is obviously something the U.S. would love to get more access here, but you're right, Rob, and just it's no matter who wins the election, there's going to be certainly conversations over the future of this free trade agreement. Kamala Harris was one of the few senators who actually voted against it. Probably went out in the Post last week or the week before, talking about some of the issues and how it had to be dealt with. Now, she's not as strong on the tariff part as Trump, but it's certainly something that could happen. And some of these barriers is just going to threaten future supply chains here and some of the other integrated sectors that we have.
Okay, so you mentioned steel and aluminum, for example, Josie. We have heard from the government that, they're planning to impose by the end of this month, I believe, they're going to be tariffs on Chinese imports into this country of steel and aluminum, Chinese-made steel and aluminum. The tariffs on EVs, Chinese-made EVs, are already in effect, 100% tariff in lockstep with the Americans. And there is a push on, and Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, has not ruled this out, of imposing tariffs or an outright ban on software, Chinese-made software that serves the auto sector, all aiming to align our trading policy with the Americans and what are viewed as the threats to the North American economy from Chinese goods. Do you think that is an effort to maybe preempt some of these irritants in trade negotiations?
It is, and it has to be. These are our largest trading partners, and so much of our economy and security relies on being, you said the word lockstep, with the United States. And I think we should be doing everything possible right now to make sure that we're looking at the geopolitical threat landscape and aligning with the U.S. But it begs the question of whether, the Liberal government is up to the task of being able to get consensus at a very critical time, when we're seeing the House backlogged and they're unable to get their policy across to be able to negotiate these very turbulent waters. And I think that is the big question heading into November, is if they are able to do the outreach while still hanging on to their political leadership and the government. There are a lot of factors at play here, and it's a very tough time to be navigating a change in government in the U.S.
Okay, Jordan?
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with that. A second Trump presidency is going to come in. It will be a lot more erratic than the first. I think he's going to listen a lot more to some of the more extreme elements that are still around him on some of these trade issues and be willing to press that with Canada, with Mexico, and with the threats that he can. I'm assuming that the current government has some connections with Kamala Harris already, but I mean, she's going to be a newly elected president and having to stand up for her own constituencies. And right now, that constituencies in the U.S. seem to be leaning much more to protectionist. So we absolutely do have to strengthen our supply chains in the face of these growing geopolitical threats that Jesse was mentioning.
Very interesting. When we come back, Pierre Poilievre and his outreach to the ethnic media in this country. We're going to talk about that when we come back. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
With our Newsday panel with Josie Sabatino from SUMA, Jordan Paquette from Blue Sky today. Very interesting article in the Toronto Star this morning that there are 1,200 ethnic media publishers, is how it describes it, the ethnic media. I've never liked that term, but it's called the National Ethnic Press and Media Council of Canada, and they say they have 1,200 members, 1,200 publishers. So it's a major media force in Canada. And the Toronto Star notes that during his cross-country tour this summer, Pierre Poilievre did more than 50 interviews and roundtables with what his office says is local and ethnic media. Didn't differentiate between the two, but nevertheless spoke with Punjab media, Ukrainian media, Portuguese media, sometimes inviting all of these various news reporters together at once. Ask me whatever you want to ask me. It's very interesting. What is going on? How important is outreach for political leaders to Canada's ethnic media? Jordan Paquette, why don't you take that one?
It's extremely important and a very good tactic for political leaders to do. You're right. I mean, they have associations. They love to be included. I think if I go back to the time on the road with Stephen Harper, sometimes we used to tack on some of these roundtables because it's a way to reach these communities who are often very tight-knit. They have their own community associations, community papers, and it's just a way to get a voice into them in their own language. Carrying on from that, we built on with Ron Ambrose, Andrew Scheer. You'd invite people to these events, these press conferences, roundtables, receptions, whatever, and you get 40 to 50 different outlets appearing at once. So it's a very good strategy to use to hit some of these communities that a lot of these times they're new Canadians, they're very politically engaged, and they vote. So it's absolutely a smart tactic by Pierre Poilievre, and it's great to see the conservatives
right.
have been building on this.
I mean, Jordan, just going back to your time working with people in that government, the Harper government. Mm-hmm. How good was Jason Kenney at this kind of thing?
Well, incredible. I mean, he was the one that I think created a lot of these strategies early on and was out there. I think, what did they call him before? I never liked the term as well, but I think it was Minister of Curry in a hurry. They had
Minister of Curry in a hurry. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember they were throwing that around. But he was out, and he was a rock star at a lot of these events. You'd go to it could be a Vietnamese Association event in Toronto. There'd be 5,000-10,000 people there, and he's being treated like a rock star because he was present at so many of these events. Same with On the Road with Andrew Scheer. Would go to Toronto on Saturday, go to as many as 12 different events per day. Every time you're going into one, you got a new publication to talk to. You got a room full of thousands of people. It's a very very important tactic to do in some of these very competitive ridings.
Josie, what do you think? What's been your experience here?
Well, it's funny because I had no idea what ethnic media was before I started working in a communications role on Parliament Hill. I mean, it's just something that's not really talked about, but Jordan made good points. Andrew
but Scheer it's thriving, though, as a media sector, so.
Absolutely, and Andrew Scheer had done this in my experience. Aaron O'Toole also did it. We would do one of these every month and gather everybody around a table. You'd have 15 to 20 reporters, and they really are focused, I think, on some topics that don't necessarily get a lot of media coverage from an in-depth perspective. And I'm thinking about immigration policies, religious freedom, things like that really affect some of these diaspora communities. And I think what's important to remember here, and I think why Pierre Poilievre is spending so much energy on this, is that it is a very targeted strategy to reach communities in those areas like Vancouver and the GTA where they really need to pick up seats in the next election to form that majority government.
Okay. What's a conservative pitch to members of the ethnic media? Do you make a pitch or do you just listen? Jordan?
You can listen. I think some of these communities, though, to Josie's point, they're very much conservative values and that they've been naturally promoting. Rules-based immigration system, religious freedoms. Many of these journalists are coming from countries who've fled communism, fled dictatorships. And so when they see a leader, they're not even used to being present with a federal political leader. So when you go to them, you give them the time of day, let them ask their questions, and really share those messaging. That's just what's been this recipe for success for so long.
Okay, Josie.
Affordability remains key. I mean, these groups came, and the people, the communities, they've come to Canada to build a better life. And I think a lot of the challenges that are affecting Canadians have affected their communities as well. You know, they want access to housing, they want good paying jobs. So I think as much as there are secondary messages here, the concerns remain the same in that people want competitive policies that make their life better. And I think that's where Pierre Poilievre has a real advantage from a messaging perspective with these groups.
I just wonder, I think back to the most recent ad that was put out by the Conservatives where Poilievre talks about woke obsessions, for example. If that is not part of a pitch to, say, a conservative immigrant community, that conservative values are your values, hard work, family, these sorts of things. Yes? No? Yes? Jordan?
Absolutely. No, that whole point about building strong communities. I can recall when we were back in the Harper government and putting the Respect for Communities Act, and it was a matter of just making sure there was community consultations if they were going to open up supervised consumption sites. And the Chinese outlets really drifted towards that. Very solid anti-drug pro-education in many of these communities. And so, they're absolutely natural constituents for conservative beliefs.
Okay, quick comment on that, Josie?
I totally agree with everything Jordan says. I mean, tough on crime, the issues happening with safe injection sites, I think that is all tied to the messages and driving at that better version of communities that, the Conservatives want to get back to.
All right, very interesting. Well, we come back. The Poilievre news conference is underway. We're monitoring whatever comes out of that. He's speaking on Parliament Hill right now, anticipating some questions from the press gallery. And we'll get a quick election prediction of the week. When does this government fall? This fall? Next fall? Somewhere in between? Newsday panel on News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now you know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio.
So we are here with Josie Sabatino, Jordan Piquette, veterans of Parliament Hill, and Pierre Poilievre is speaking right now. He's been speaking in French since he began his remarks some minutes ago. He wants a group called Semidoun banned in Canada. That seems to be the thrust of his remarks so far. I think the inspiration for this was what happened in British Columbia yesterday. This is a video that has gone viral. We have the audio of it. It is shocking, actually, that this happened in Canada. But this was yesterday in BC.
I do not wonder how revolution could possibly be done. Men who have never known a free day, who have lived their entire lives under the thumb of one of the most powerful settler colonies in the world, built paragliders to fly over a wall so high that it blocked out the sun when you stood underneath it. Do not wonder how revolution could be done. We must do it. Death to Canada. Death to the United States. And death to Israel.
Yeah, isn't that something? Death to Canada, death to the United States, death to Israel. And a crowd applauds. My goodness. There's no point in going to the remarks right now because they're in French from Mr. Poilievre, but he wants this group banned in Canada. How these people have not been detained, arrested, charged with, this is incitement. This is hatred right in the streets, right out in the open. Do you have any thoughts on this, Jordan? What are your thoughts on what you're hearing so far?
Yeah, I think this goes far beyond free speech. It's one thing to have strong positions on the state of Canada today, our history, Israel's right to exist. But when you're openly in the streets calling for the death of the country and citizens and glorifying terror, we enter a totally different territory. It seems like also leading into what some of the Pierre's remarks were about were some of these things about banning the IRGC, how long the government dragged their feet for. So I think certainly trying to add some of the pressure on the government now to actually take action on some of these groups.
Okay, Josie, just a quick comment on that, if you will, please.
Yeah, Poilievre has made common sense his platform language. I think this fits squarely into that, and I can't imagine any Canadian listening to that video and thinking that this is not common sense to call for a policy like this.
Okay, we have about 60 seconds left. When does the government fall? This fall, next fall, or in between? Maybe next spring? Give me a quick prediction. What do you say, Jordan?
Well, all of last year, I was one of the few people I think that was predicting an election in 2024. We are running out of time, but I'm giving it a 50-50 chance that it will be this fall, early December vote.
Early December vote, okay. 50-50. What do you think, Josie?
I'm going to put my marker on early spring. I think the Liberals have crawled out of situations like this before, and I think they've got a little bit more runway just with the impending U.S. election.
Does that include prorogation? Your analysis? Josie?
Hopefully we're not talking about prorogation. No? It's been floating up. It's been coming up, but hopefully that's not the case.
All right. Interesting. Great conversation today. Covered a lot of ground today. Thank you so much. We'll speak soon. All the best.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Josie.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Josie Sabatino from Summa Strategies, Jordan Biquette from Blue Sky Strategy Group. I'm Rob Snow. The Talk Back is coming up right after the news here on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back, 2 hours to debate and discuss the big issues of the day. We have 2 topics for you to consider today, to think about and call in and offer an opinion. One of them is what I would call foreign aid. And the other is about housing affordability, young people trying to buy homes. So here are some questions to get the conversation going. As it stands right now, the Canadian government spends more than $16 billion a year helping other countries. What do you think should happen with that money? Should spending be increased on foreign aid? Should it be reduced? Should it be put under review? Should it be eliminated? How would you answer those questions? That's topic number 1 for the day, foreign aid. Topic number 2, housing affordability, young people trying to buy a place of their own. Is it all but impossible for young people to buy a home these days if they can't count on help from their parents, financial help from their parents? Not impossible, but darn near impossible. What would you say to that? How would you answer that question? Those are the 2 topics for the next couple of hours. Feel free to comment on one or both. Our call-in line is 1-833-668-2577. That's 1-833-668-2577. On foreign aid, or what the government calls international development assistance, I wanted to jump into this topic with your help today because of what came out of our conversation yesterday. We were asking yesterday kind of a general question. What do you think is the biggest issue facing the country right now? What's the biggest challenge facing Canadians right now? And a number of callers raised this issue with us. In fact, it was among the more popular answers. Callers to the show were telling us the Canadian government is spending too much money in other countries, and it's not spending enough money in this country. And so I thought about that last night because I've been doing these kinds of shows for a long time, and it's been rare in the past that I would do a show like that and have so many people bring up this issue, foreign aid. But I think because of the circumstances in the country being what they are, it's becoming a bigger issue now. And I want to dig a little deeper into it with your help as to why that is the case. Many callers were telling me things along the lines of, look at all the need in the country. Look at the homelessness. Look at the use of food banks. Look at the healthcare system. Look at the number of people who are really struggling, living this close to the edge. And then they read reports or they see stories on the news and politicians making announcements, sending millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to other countries. And they think that money would be better spent in this country, addressing the needs in this country. So we have the actual numbers. The numbers are all there. They're publicly available. How much we're spending, where it's going, and we break that down for you. Some of it's quite illuminating, actually. We just want to know what you think should be done with this sort of funding. The flip side would be we're a wealthy country, very blessed to live in this country, one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And given that standing, aren't we as Canadians obligated to help poorer people in poorer countries? What would you say to that? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. As for our other topic, housing affordability for young people, David and I had quite a discussion about this morning in advance of the show. I want to get back into this because of something that I read in one of the newspapers this morning, column in the Globe and Mail, the author making the case that whether or not a young person will end up owning a home as opposed to renting, it's basically now decided the moment they're born. And Canadians who are lucky enough to have parents who can help them out by giving them money for a down payment and whatnot, they have won life's lottery. And young people who can't count on help from their parents, they have no chance of winning life's lottery, and they have no chance of ever owning a home. The odds now are just too stacked against them. I don't know if I totally buy into that, but I want to ask you, do you think it's true? And if you don't think it's true, and young people are still able to buy houses even without help from their parents, how does a young person go about doing that? What's involved with that? Is the sacrifice even worth it? What would you say? Our phone lines are open right now, 1-833-668-2577, 1-833-668-2577. And if you've never called before, just mention that you're a first-time caller, and our call screener will make your call a priority. Let's get going here. Peter is called in from Halifax. Thank you for calling, Peter. Hi there.
Hi. How are you?
Hi, Peter. I'm good, Peter. Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you know what? I'll talk about the foreign aid.
Foreign aid, yes.
We are foreign aid. If you were to look at a map, you would see the second largest geographical area in the world. And where are our palaces? Where is our Taj Mahal? Where is our earth-shaking infrastructure? Where are our technical marvels?
Okay.
They're all in England. And England is about the size of a postage stamp compared to Canada. So as far as foreign aid goes, we have been giving everything we own to that little country floating about in the North Atlantic, where the ruler drives around in golden gilded carriages being pulled by 6 horses, and he shuts the whole city down.
Yeah.
Now look at but once again, look at England on a map.
Okay.
And say to yourself, what vast resources have they been able to exploit to achieve this massive empire?
Okay, you're not really answering the question.
Wealth.
Let's deal in the here and now. We have a Canadian government that is spending $16 billion a year on foreign aid.
When our children are not coming down with scurvy,
right,
and we are not living in tents, and when our infrastructure is not crumbling beneath our feet like it is here in Halifax, then let us be as generous as the good Lord allows us. But until such a time as we clean up our own disgusting, filthy mess.
Okay. So would you say we're spending too much then, Peter?
I'd say we're not spending enough on ourselves, and we
not spending enough on ourselves. Okay, valid point. Okay, thank you, Peter. Got to run. Thank you. Okay, we are off and running for a talkback on Tuesday. I'm Rob Snow. Feel free to jump in on the conversation here. 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Foreign aid, young people trying to buy a house. There's 2 topics for today. The Canadian government spends more than $16 billion a year on foreign aid, international development, international assistance. What should happen with that money? Should the government be spending more, spending less, review the spending, cancel the spending? On housing, can younger Canadians buy a home these days without help from their parents? And if they can, how do you do that? And what makes it worth it? 1-833-668-2577. Tyler in Cambridge. Thank you for calling, Tyler. Hi, Tyler.
Hi there.
Hi, Tyler. Go ahead.
I would stop foreign aid completely.
And why do you say that, sir?
We're just so far in debt. All these politicians just keep throwing their money around, or our money around. They could balance the budget at their own household, but yet when it's free money that they're not having to use their own, they just overspend constantly. And how good is that when you're paying interest on all the extra expenses that they spend?
Okay.
So until we
because of the
balance
fiscal
our budget,
position, what if the economy was better? What if the government's finances were better? Would you support foreign aid then?
Yeah, I would. Like if we were out of debt, we didn't have any.
We're out of debt.
Anything like that, I would say, yeah, sure, help out. Like, why wouldn't you? But until, like I said, less people at food banks, less people trying to get a job, people on welfare that make a career out of it. There's got to be a bunch of changes. Life in society is getting so lazy, and kids asking for their parents for money.
Oh, okay. Your phone is dropping out. Your phone is dropping out there, Tyler. But I do thank you for your call. I would just say, just to play devil's advocate, Canada is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and the case could be made where we have an obligation to help poorer people in poorer countries, given how blessed we are in this country. That would be the flip side. Let's go to Malcolm in Alberta. Wants to talk about housing. Hi, Malcolm.
Hi, Rob.
How are you, Malcolm?
All right.
That's good.
So about the housing.
Yes.
I'm 21.
Yeah.
And right out of high school, I started working in the trades.
Okay.
I am a third-year auto body apprentice, and I'm already making good money to where I'm starting to save for a house.
Okay.
My sister, she lives in Edmonton. She now owns a home after she owned a home in Lethbridge. She's 25.
Wow. Okay.
And we did not have a very, let's say, privileged growing up.
Right, you had a modest upbringing, right?
Yeah, my dad, he worked every day. My mom, she took care of us until she had to get a job to keep the farm.
Right.
But I think that the biggest thing facing us young folk is, like what the last guy was talking about, is being lazy.
Being lazy, okay.
There's a lot of people that are on welfare and a lot of people that are doing these jobs here and there or working from home, doing the like, can't remember what it is, but if you have a question on a website, you talk to this person and that's all they do. They'll maybe answer 2 or 3 questions all day, but you look at the trades and we're at lower than low numbers for people joining.
Okay, so you tell me you're 21 years old?
Yes, I'm 21.
Okay, and you fully expect to buy a home?
Yes,
You do.
I've started the process of first-time home buyers account.
Good. Okay.
And
and you're not going to get any help from your parents.
No,
right. What kind of sacrifices are you making?
I don't eat out every day.
Right.
I live very modestly. I drive a 2004 Corolla.
2004 Corolla. Holy cow.
Like, I'm pinching every penny I can, but that's just to make it work. When you see all these people, they're trying to drive fancy cars but still live in mom and dad's basement.
Sure. 2004 Corolla. How many kilometers are on that thing 20 years later? My goodness gracious.
Let's just say it's a lot.
Yeah, I suspect so. Yeah, they just never die, those Toyota Corollas. I had one of those. It may have even been older than that, but it's long gone now. What do you think about this idea that it's impossible what you're doing? There's no way Canadians could buy a home unless they have help from their parents. You're obviously, you're doing it. Do you think it's worth it?
It's very worth it, and I say that it's not impossible. It's just about how determined you are. If you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to work towards something like this, then instead of standing on a street corner waving a sign, get a job in a trade that's going to pay you good money.
Okay.
Instead of $15 an hour, most opening rates, especially out here in Alberta, they'll start you over minimum wage. And you just got to work. That's all it is. That's all there is to it. And then you
hard work and determination. Okay, great advice, Malcolm. Thank you for your call. Great to hear from you today. I'm Rob Snow. It's Talkback. On Tuesday, we're talking about foreign aid. We're talking about young people trying to buy houses, and we can't do it without you. 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio.
Time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
The Canadian government is spending roughly $16 billion a year on foreign aid. What should happen with that money? On housing. Can younger Canadians really expect to buy a home these days if they don't have any help from their parents? Let's go to Steve in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Steve. Hi there.
You know, I got an 05 Toyota Matrix with 420K on it with no engine light. The key, it's really simple. If you change your fluids like Mr. Lube tells you to do and flush your radiator every whatever it is, they'll run for, almost any car will run a long time.
Okay.
Anyways, if you live in South Edmonton, you can buy a house half the price in Millet and you're at work in 30 minutes. In North Calgary, if you work in North Calgary, you go to Carstairs, you can buy a house for 2/3 the price. But these small towns are a better place to raise your child because they don't got to be driven everywhere. Also, if you do what I did, you rent out, you live in the basement and you rent out the top floor. If you're willing to do that for the first 5 years, you can get enough equity in there. But, of course, the problem people have is, how do I get that initial equity? And that is, buy a 2005 Toyota
and drive it for 400,000 kilometers.
Well,
right?
I look at a new car, and it is crazy. It's like $60,000.
Yeah.
And make your own damn coffee. Anyways, my thoughts.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Thank you. Lee is calling from Kitchener on foreign aid. Lee, thank you for calling, Lee. Go ahead.
Hey, Rob. I really think that the solution to foreign aid is simple. I've thought this for a long time, that foreign aid should be linked to running a deficit budget. And if we're running a deficit, then we shouldn't be spending money on foreign aid, because we shouldn't be borrowing money to give it away. And then I think, like, right now it's even more of an acute problem, because we have so many, like, need to have items. Like, hospitals are just, it's just not okay here. Like, I have parents that are kind of getting older, and when they go to the hospital, like, some of the times you're just like, holy cow, like, this would never have happened 20 years ago.
I'm living with that right now. I can share with you. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So it really comes down to, like, just like more responsible money management from the government. Like, we sure, there's lots of, like, nice to have things, but we're not doing the need to have things, the stuff, like, where it's not so fun to, like, you know, save for retirement or save for your education, but that's what a responsible parent does. And when you're running the government, like, build infrastructure, take care of healthcare, those things where it's like just kind of like expectations, but doesn't win you any votes. Like, you have to do those things first. But right now, like, we're basically just borrowing from our kids. And to go along with your other callers' things on housing, like, the two guys from Alberta, I 100% agree with what they're saying. Like, personal responsibility is a big part of it, and you can make good decisions to make it easier. On the other hand, like, I'm 44, and I would say that, like, the opportunities that we're giving our kids right now are not fair. Like, yes, maybe you can get a house, but it is not even remotely as easy as it was for me or for my parents. And I just don't think this is a sustainable trajectory.
All right. Great points all around today, Lee. Thank you for your call. We'll be right back. The news is coming up next. It's Talkback on News Radio.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Foreign aid, that's topic number one. Young people trying to buy houses. Topic number two. On the whole issue of foreign aid, I did some digging in advance of the show. I was actually surprised how easy the information was to find. How much of Canadian taxpayers' dollars is spent in other countries in any given year? It's a big number. It is $16.049 billion. And the vast majority of that money, more than 2/3 of it, is used for what's known as international development assistance, or what an old-timer would call foreign aid. And that helps to fund 3,000 assistance projects all over the world. Okay, so according to Global Affairs, these are the top 20 countries that get financial help from Canada. Ukraine is far and away number one on the list. Ukraine, $5.4 billion. Second on the list, Nigeria. I was a bit surprised by that. $277 million. And Ethiopia, $251 million. And then I'll quickly run down the rest here. Bangladesh, Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, Jordan, Mozambique, Kenya, Pakistan, Haiti, Senegal, South Sudan, Afghanistan, Mali, Syria, $125 million to Syria, Yemen, $120 million, Ghana, India, $112 million, and Indonesia, number 20 on the list, $112 million. Figures are between, you say, 100 to 200 million for most of those other countries. That's the top 20. That's the top 20. I just wanted to run that down for you, just so you have a better idea how much is being spent, where it's being spent. Let's go to Michael in Calgary. Thank you, Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hey, how's it going?
It goes, sir. Thank you. Okay. What's your opinion on foreign aid?
I can't believe those countries that you just named off, for one. Most of those aren't even friendly to Canada. So basically how I feel about this foreign aid is it's like Canada is like a guy that walks into a bar, chucks a bunch of money in the air and says, the drinks are on me, which is actually turning the country more into somebody once quoted a 2-star hotel at 5-star prices. I think the world has actually gone to crap. be honest with you. And we'll be lucky if we actually get through the next few years. As for Ukraine, yeah.
Well, that's a pretty dour outlook.
Yeah, I've been there. It's a nice place, but it was very corrupt when I was there.
Right.
That's my point of view. War is terrible. Yeah, the only thing that benefits from war is actually the companies, not the people in it. As for living, I live in an RV. I pay rent.
You live in an RV?
On the streets.
Wow.
I'm almost 55 years old. I live with my dog, which was actually kind of hard to find a place to rent because I have a dog. I'm actually going to move out of this country unless we change our government party itself. I feel that Canada has totally betrayed its people. The young people especially. I would not want to be a kid growing up in this country.
Wow.
Before I used to be a proud Canadian. I used to serve for this country.
Very negative outlook, sir.
Shame.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael. Yep. Bye-bye. Veronica is in Waterloo. Thank you for calling, Veronica. Hi, Veronica.
Hi. How are you?
Hi. I'm good. Thank you, Veronica. You want to talk about foreign aid as well?
A short opinion about the foreign aid that Canada, the amounts of money that Canada is spending. So I myself, I'm an immigrant. Came to Canada over 40 years looking forward to my retirement, work all those 40 years, looking forward to my retirement in the next 5 years. I'm going to get the very minimum of the whatever retirement CPP pays because I don't have any private plans. It's just my regular retirement, working hard and just my regular savings. So, as much as every year I make a little bit more money because I'm professional, I'm an architectural technologist, every year I get a little bit increase, and I'm doing better. A lot more of my money is going towards taxes. And yes, as I was welcoming to Canada as an immigrant, I really appreciate what the original mentality was about or plan was for, Canada to grow. But the way we are growing right now is just ridiculous. It's in my times when I came 40 years ago, my goodness, to hear that they were allowing 200,000 immigrants a year, that was a huge amount. And now what I hear, the numbers that I've heard lately, 500,000, 1 million, that is just out of it's out of this world.
Yeah, that's just one stream. That's just one stream,
industry,
right?
And then I know how hard it is building homes, how difficult it is building homes. And unless you come with absolutely loaded, you cannot afford to live in this country the way how it was 40 years ago to the way it is right now. But the only thing I wanted to leave out there, and if anybody could hear that in regards to foreign aid, I grew up in a country that was very, very poor at the time I grew up, El Salvador. Now it has improved a lot. Good for them. Mm-hmm. My country is Canada. I swear allegiance to Canada, and this is where I live, and this is where my life and everything is here. But what I wanted to say, my father always told us when we were young that charity starts at home. And, I'm a very charitable, my family is a very charitable family, but we take care of our own family first. And this is what troubles me with the Canadian government. They are turning their back on our seniors. There is a lot of mental illness. Our hospitals they don't have enough money. Food banks, when I came and I was a young student in 1985, there were no food banks at that time. I had to make sure that I stay in touch with my relatives because that's where I could get an extra meal if I had to eat a meal at that day. But the way how food banks are growing, everything is ridiculous.
Right. Okay.
So what I want to keep
this dollar figure, Veronica,
is that charity starts at home, and that's what matters to me.
Okay, Veronica, just before you jump there, so what should happen to this money? $16 billion a year. Should it be put under review? Should it be cut entirely? Reduced dramatically? What would you say?
You just said the three of them. All of the above should be reduced,
okay.
reduced dramatically, and it should be reviewed regularly as to how it's used and really take care of our people first. And our people is everybody who came from all over the world, who is here, who is working, who is contributing to this big to the economy. This is who we have to take care of first.
Okay. Thank you for your call. Interesting to hear your opinion, Veronica in Waterloo. Thank you. I'm Rob Snow. It's Talkback, 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Two topics on the go today. Young people trying to buy houses. What's it like if you're a young person and you don't get money from your parents? How do you do that? How do you try and buy a house if you're not getting financial aid from your parents? And we're also talking about foreign aid, $16 billion a year from this country to other countries. What do you think about what should be happening with that money? It's a lot of money, $16.4 billion a year. Let's go to Brendan calling from Nova Scotia. Brendan, thank you for calling, sir, on housing.
Hey.
Brendan. Hi.
Hey, Rob. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
I was just called into you yesterday. I'm not sure if you remember me or not, but my main thing that I'm calling about is the housing situation just for younger people. As I mentioned to you yesterday, being 28 and just being able to, and just struggling to try and be able to save money to afford a home, especially here in Nova Scotia where the house prices are just insane with what we have to deal with cost of living and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think part of the problem, man, is there's a problem from the landlords themselves and there's a problem from the banks themselves. Like it's not just one thing. The way coming from the materials and the cost of it. So I feel like
okay, I'm having trouble getting you, Brendan. Your cell phone is cracking up there. I'm afraid I'm going to have to move along because we can only hear every second word that you're actually saying. So let's move along here. Sorry about that, Brendan. Call back another time. Ernie in Kitchener. Ernie, hi there, Ernie.
Hey, Rob.
On 4
Hey, Rob.
Hi.
I'll try to be quick here. I don't want. I hope Trudeau isn't listening to me right now. But what I was thinking with the foreign aid. Like, what if we actually just did a thing and we took that money and said, this is Canadian aid. We know times have been tough. It's been terrible. Everything's more expensive.
Yeah.
And we split that across the board. Like, I'd be surprised if a caller's going to call in and say yes to do that today, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's just kind of like a smirk comment, I guess you could say. But, I mean, we are the ones that are struggling here. And it seems like they don't even care. So I know that would be a little bit of a boost to their polls. And that's why I hope they're not listening for that idea.
Okay.
As the home ownership, the caller that called in, the 21-year-old in the trade, it's from his mentality right there is unreal, and I was like pretty encouraged to hear that, and I can tell that you were too, and also too. But I find it's not easy just to have that mentality. I can see why some of them are just like, why even bother? There's not a chance. And I remember I got my first, like I'm 40 now, and I felt like that when I was 25, and that was a lot easier then to get a home than what it is now. And I remember the banks telling me no, and what I did, I just went to people that had them. I went to an expert. He goes, no, Ernie, this is what you have to do. So I want to encourage other listeners that are obviously younger, like you have to find the resources and find ways to make it happen and not give up if you want that to happen. But is it way harder now than when it was when I got it?
I just wonder, and this is what David and I, you feel free to jump in on the conversation, David, because this is what kind of quality of life do you have these days? Like here in Ottawa, for example, starter townhome. We were looking this up, like in the burbs, in what used to be a farmer's field, a good hours worth of rush hour traffic to get downtown to the Parliament buildings. What was it, Dave? 589,000? Something like that?
Yeah, 589 starting.
589,000. 1,300 square foot townhome.
Yeah.
Right next to 100 other townhomes that all look the same. And we were calculating like, okay, you put 10% down. What's your mortgage look like? How much is your utility bill? What's your property tax? By the time you do that, you're up to $3,200 a month, $3,300 a month, something like that. What kind of quality of life can a young person have? Does chasing the house dream become all consuming? I guess this is one of the things I'm wondering.
It's more or less you really got to do the pros and cons, like with your life. Like, is this something that you want? And also, too, home ownership can get you further ahead later on if that's what it is. If you're okay with being where you're at and you want to travel and do those sort of things and spend your money while you're younger, I more or less see it as the pros and cons, but I totally get what you're saying. It's incredibly much harder. That's why I was encouraged to hear that caller. He understands, you could hear the sacrifices he has to make in order to make that happen, to make that dream happen.
Yeah, he's driving a 20-year-old Toyota Corolla.
So, I mean, it's really, and that's where also, too, when that happened with us, we got renters in our house. And my wife and I decided we're going to have people living in our house. We're going to rent it out so we can eventually buy our home. But also, too, during that time when we got our home, we were able to actually get another property because we owned that home in the first place. And also, too, like, he mentioned the trades, too. Like, you got to really, I live in KW, and this is insane. The prices, this is the fastest growing area in Canada. Yeah. But to have the same advice to a 21-year-old here, I don't even know if I can even just give him that hope, Rob. And that's what's sad. That's what's really, really sad. And I hope this changes. Like, we all do.
What do you figure in Kitchener, where you are, as you say, one of the fastest growing areas of the country? Okay. What do you figure a starter townhome is going for there?
It's anywhere around between
750, something like that.
It's going like 700 to 800. Like a really low income one, maybe 650. Like a one that's older.
Right.
But I would say minimum 7 to 8.
Wow. Holy cow. Okay. Thank you, Ernie. Good to hear from you and get your perspective today. It's Talk Back. I'm Rob Snow, hour number 1. Still full hour ahead. Lots of time to take your call. 2 big topics today. Trying to buy a home as a younger Canadian, someone in their 20s, maybe early 30s. What's that like if you don't get any help from your parents? Is it even possible? Is it darn near impossible if you don't get help from your parents? And 4 and 8, some $16 billion a year. It's a lot of money that leaves this country to do good works in other countries. What should happen to that money, if anything? Your thoughts, please, on Talkback. You're on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Talking about housing again today, the struggle that some young people are having to try and afford a home. If you did it, how did you do it? Is it worth it? Can you do it without help from your parents? And foreign aid, a hot topic today, $16 billion of foreign aid. Just like your thoughts on that number, what you think of that number, what should happen with that number. Let's go to Tim in Halifax. Thank you for calling, Tim. Hi there.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good, Tim. Thank you.
Oh, that's good. Listen, let me ask you a question. What if I told you that there was a country out there that over 600 communities didn't have clean drinking water? Like, don't you think we should help these people?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm not saying we shouldn't help people. I'm asking people what they think of the foreign aid budget, where the money is going, and whether it should be put under some kind of review, because some people are looking at the need in this country and saying maybe we should spend that kind of money here, you know?
I totally understand, but do you know which country this is?
I'm not sure what country you're talking about. Okay, you're talking about clean water in Canada. Sure.
Yes. We have over 600 native communities that do not have clean drinking water. I think it's 618. I Googled it before I called you. Now, do you think, like, should our money be going somewhere else? Well, people don't have a basic necessity as clean drinking water.
Right. Okay.
And it's been decades.
Yes.
That's roughly like $26 million per community. Like, the problem couldn't be solved with $26 million per community. I always wanted to call just to bring that to light and into the topic.
Yes, sir.
Because
I think it's a very valid point that you raise.
Like Afghanistan. Like, literally, haven't we been fighting to get people out of there? Like, not until recently.
Well, in fact, for many years during the Harper government, Afghanistan was the number 1 recipient of international assistance from Canada.
Yeah, but at that point, it wasn't controlled by who they're controlled by now.
Well, right. Yeah, we were fighting a war and were heavily engaged there and had a lot invested in trying to make that country a better place, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that the basically billions of dollars. Anyways, I called yesterday. It goes back to what I said, political accountability. They've been saying for years that they're going to fix these reserves. Clean drinking water, I don't necessarily agree with everything they got. I don't disagree with everything they got. But these people should have clean drinking water. And I'll leave it at that.
Of course, everybody should have clean drinking water. Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Let's go to Dave in Calgary. We don't have a lot of time, but I would like to hear from Dave before I wrap things up here for hour number one. Dave, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, Dave. Thanks for calling, Dave. Not a lot of time.
On the foreign aid matter, then,
yes,
a lot of people are thinking it's a simple case of not spending $16 billion outside the country and spend it at home. It's never going to be the case. I'm sorry to disappoint everybody, but you're not going to get $16 billion back in the domestic budget. The money that's sent overseas is used to exert Canadian influence and buy influence, be that in trade deals, in diplomatic areas, and the other bit of it is used in aid. I mean, your previous caller mentioned Afghanistan. We send money there to look after the people who are not the Taliban. I know we spent a long time out there fighting the Afghans, as he put it. I spent a year there myself.
Okay.
That's not why we spend money.
Look, I really want more time with you. If you don't mind hanging on through the news, I'll bring you back on right after the news. Your choice.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Yeah, it'd be about 3-4 minutes. Okay? Just hang on. Hour number 2 of the Talkback coming up on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
We've been discussing 2 topics today. One of them is foreign aid. The other, young people trying to buy houses. The Canadian government spends $16 billion a year on foreign aid. Ask you, what do you think should happen with that money? More spending, less spending, review of spending, cancel spending on housing. Can younger Canadians buy a home these days without help from their parents? If they can, how do you do it? What makes it worth it? Just a little bit more on foreign aid, where the money goes. I'll break it down by geographic region this time, not by country. It's $1 billion spent in the Americas, and Haiti is the top recipient there. $5.7 billion in Europe, but again, Ukraine is getting the bulk of that. $4.1 billion in Africa. Again, Nigeria, top source country for top recipient country for foreign assistance from Canada. Across Asia, $1.7 billion. Bangladesh is the top recipient there. So it is a lot of money. What I heard yesterday from some people is that we shouldn't be spending that money at all. So what I want to ask you again is what you think should happen. What you think should happen. Dave had some thoughts just before the news, but we were running tight on time, so he has agreed to stay on the line, and we'll pick his brain a little bit more. Hi, Dave. You could just pick up where you left off, Dave. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. What you have to remember is Canadian influence is being bought across the world. That may help our export, it may help our political influence, our diplomatic influence, and it may be going to the poor people of those countries who are very much deserving. The disappointing thing for most Canadians is that $16 billion won't be spent in Canada if it's removed from the foreign budget. That influence that we exert with that cash is immensely important to Canadian political.
How so?
Well, it's influenced. The money that goes to Ukraine isn't battling on behalf of Ukrainians. It's battling against Russia, for example. It's part of our NATO influence. We don't have enough money to spend on our armed forces, and we don't have our armed forces directly involved in that. But we need to be seen to assist NATO in fighting that fight, even though it's not a NATO conflict. It's indirect influence. We spend a lot of money in India. You said 112 million. India's probably not the most deserving of people, but we have a huge Indian population in Canada, and that reciprocal influence is very, very important.
Important trade relationship, particularly in agriculture, for example, right? So
massive. Yeah. I mean, agriculture is huge, but just the Nigeria, one of our major trading partners in Africa is Nigeria. What we're trying to do there is supply enough money to stop the influence of the Muslim insurgencies in the northern area of the country, whilst maintaining our balance in the oil market, because Nigeria is a major OPEC player. There's a lot of Chinese influence in Africa, which we need to at least show our face when it comes to matching it. The Chinese are massively involved in mineral extraction over there, and that's minerals that we need over here because they don't appear on the Canadian subcontinent.
You seem to have some experience with this, Where do you draw that experience from?
It's just having a wider look at the world. It's looking at where you came from. We mentioned earlier Afghanistan. We don't pay to keep the Taliban in power. We pay to influence the Taliban to treat their people as we would like to see them treated. Ultimately, the Taliban is a trading organization. My time in Afghanistan, 1 week the warlords would fight for us, 1 week they would fight against us. And it was down to who was supplying the most attractive deal.
Very interesting. Okay, Dave. Thank you for sharing your experience there, Dave. Very interesting. Brendan in Nova Scotia, back with us, hopefully with a better phone this time, on housing. Young people trying to buy housing. Go ahead, Brendan.
Hi, can you hear me good now?
Yeah, sound much better now, Brendan. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, my job has me in different places where there's no service, so
that's okay.
So pretty much what I was talking about when I was cutting in and out was how I understand from one side of the people who own the homes that rent them and for the absurd prices that we're seeing them on the markets for, and the banks themselves. Now, like I was saying earlier when I was cutting out, I don't think it's one person that we need to point the finger at. It's both situationally because the banks are raising mortgages on people, they're raising interest rates, they're just raising the costs in general of owning a home. That puts the pressure on these landlords to do the same thing to try and make back the money that they can spend on buying these homes to rent them out. So I don't think it's one person in specific that we should be blaming. I think it's the banks and the landlords all at the same time, intertwined.
Okay.
So
you are not a homeowner right now, right? Don't have a mortgage?
No.
Right? You're renting.
Like I was telling you yesterday, right? I currently rent a home.
You rent a home. Okay.
Yes.
And what is the likelihood, or what are your chances that you will become a homeowner?
Quite frankly, right now, until the house prices come down, it's going to be probably at least another 3 to 5 years before I can even consider purchasing. That'll put me at probably about the age of 32 or 33.
Okay.
So,
and what sacrifices would you have to make between now and then, do you think?
Well, are
you going to have a social life? Are you going to be able to go out to dinner, go to the movies, take a vacation, these kinds of things?
Well, listen, I'm 28 and I'm having my third child in a couple of weeks, so I don't have a social life.
You don't have any money. So
no, I don't have any money and I don't have a social life, so that's completely fine with me for the social side of it. But no, it's just it's not even the cost of having children. Now, given when me and my wife decided to have kids, this was before the pandemic happened and the cost of like inflation and everything has happened. We definitely probably would have held on to having kids a little bit later in life so we could financially figure things out sooner.
Right.
But, hindsight's 20/20 in this situation. But we're optimistic that the market eventually will come down to the point that houses are affordable. And there's a lot of first-time home buyer, programs with banks and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I'm with RBC.
What do you think of, and we'll wrap up on this point if you don't mind. This
it's all good.
Business about 30-year mortgages. Do you think that will be helpful to you, a 30-year mortgage?
I think so. And another sacrifice that I'm making myself is I'm also with that gentleman that drives the Matrix and drives the Corolla. I drive a 2005 Toyota Echo, and it's still running strong.
Wow. A lot of mid-2000 Toyotas still on the road by the sounds of them.
Listen, man, you could drive them until they die. And when I bought it back in 2020, and it had 72,000 kilometers on it. It was a one-time owner from an old lady.
Wow. Brand new car, 72,000. Okay, Okay, we got to go. Thank you, Brendan, for hanging in there and calling us back. Great call. Yep, anytime. Talk back. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
So I find this kind of interesting. I'll just, before we get back to the calls, just jump in here for listeners in Nova Scotia. Michael Deatter, the political cartoonist, has just tweeted that he's been let go from the Halifax Chronicle-Herald, which used to have Halifax owners. Company went bankrupt and was bought by Post Media. And Deatter's been doing political cartoons for the Halifax Chronicle Herald for 30 years, he says. And he says, David, listen to this quote. Postmedia has no concept of the importance of editorial cartooning in Nova Scotia that has lasted since before the Second World War. I'm going to be honest, I didn't even want the reason. I know the reason they've decided to stop being a newspaper and officially become a flyer, so I hung up.
Wow. Pretty strong words.
So not just not doing cartoons anymore, but it's like light the match and throw it on the bridge behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, it's a tough time in the business.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, very difficult. Okay. Let's get back to the phones. We've been talking about a couple of things. We've been talking about the foreign aid budget in this country. We've been talking about the struggles that young people are having to get into the real estate market, have a place to call their own. Let's go to Monty in Alberta. Hi, Monty.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, Monty. How are you?
Good, thanks. You probably get that question a lot. We know you're doing well.
That's okay.
Hey,
I just answered, yeah.
Yeah. Just Dave's comments were very enlightening, very astute, by the way. I just wanted to say that. And one thing about foreign aid, I wonder what percentage of GDP that $16.4 billion is, because that would probably shed a little light on how much we're actually putting in to foreign governments and providing to others. But on the topic quickly about home ownership, there's just two things I want to say.
Sure.
The one is if I'm a young person, I go where the economy is growing. I moved to Fort McMurray before it blew up, and I didn't have a hope of home ownership until I went there in 1999. Alberta wasn't going until the late 90s, right? Everybody thinks it's been this cornucopia. And so, I managed to get in on a low market that grew, and I built equity. So if you think about that...
What were you doing in Fort McMurray?
I started working in a tool crib, to be honest with you, and then I ended up working in the mines. Then I became a safety professional. So a lot of people say things about Fort McMurray, but everything I have in life I owe to that decision to move there. But I also moved in a time before there were these things called Airbnb, and I really think this is the bigger issue.
Okay.
It's squeezing the rental and housing market for the young folks where private equity and people with money buy houses and rent them out by the night, by the week. And it's squeezing. I mean, my wife and I were just in Barcelona. We saw the go-home tourist stuff spray-painted everywhere. People are getting squeezed out of the big cities because of that situation. I think government has to step in and put some...
Well, there are lots of regulations. The regulations for that are more at the municipal level with bylaws and what can be rented out and what can't be rented out, this kind of thing. I don't know, but my own personal opinion on the whole short-term rental thing is I think it's a bit overblown. I think governments are kind of looking for excuses to justify their own poor decisions on urban planning, zoning regulations, the fight against expansion of cities, these sorts of things, anti-car policies, years-long delays at within the municipal bureaucracy, the cost of development charges, all of these things. The fact is there are 14 million dwellings in Canada. There are only a few 100,000 short-term rentals. I mean, it's minuscule when you look at the entire housing stock.
Okay, well, it's a fair point. Those are good numbers I wasn't aware of. I just wondered in maybe, once again, the data and the devil's in the details, how many of those are within the major markets like Toronto, Vancouver, even Calgary now, it sounds like Nova Scotia, where it's the housing prices are getting out of reach for some people, right?
Okay.
It depends on where the capacity is, I suppose.
All right. Hey, thank you, Monty, for your call. And I'm still doing well, and I appreciate your phone call. It's Talk Back. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Jake in Cambridge on foreign aid. Go ahead, Jake. What's your opinion here?
Hey, Rob. Thanks for taking my call, big buddy. Okay, so on foreign donation, the $16 billion that's announced, not confirmed, sent, delivered. Yes, no?
Well, this is actually looking in the rearview mirror. It's 2022, 2023 data.
Okay, so
I'm using here,
here's my problem with foreign donation is we give money to the government as a tax base, and I'm not confident in how that's spent and distributed. Right. If you look at the Liberal track record of the last 9 years, it's a disaster. So if I send $10 to Ukraine, Cuba, India, why doesn't anyone send us money to have influence with us? And I'll tell you this, I think that it's a kickback scheme to people in leadership positions, and I think that Trudeau, the old man, did it in the 70s with Castro and other countries, and when Trudeau said Canada's back, I shuddered at the thought of what he's going to do. But, the foreign donation, the accountability of that money and how it's spent and where it goes and whose pocket it goes into, it's certainly not going to people who are in need. I'll tell you that, okay? I think it's a washing money scheme, personally, and a way to steal from the public. That's my opinion.
Okay. I don't know about that, but I know a popular opinion in some, say, international assistance circles is that Canada's foreign aid should come with strings attached, like guarantees about corruption or democratic reform or respect for human rights. It should be tied to international development should be tied to democratic development as well.
Okay, I can buy that, but I'm just telling you that I don't believe that's happening.
You don't believe it is? Okay, all right.
No way.
All right, thank you, Jake.
On the housing thing, before you dump me.
Okay, sure.
Okay. The landlord and the bank operate in a system or an environment where they can make a profit to function. It's not the landlord. It's not the bank. It's the government. Period. End of sentence. 35% of your gross costs on a new build is taxed in one way, shape, or form or another. I know that sounds high, but it's the truth.
Oh, no.
Now, 35%, okay? Like Vinny only charged 10% for protection in the 20s, right? Now we have the Liberal government charging 35%. The bottom line is the cost of government is too high, the cost of government is too big, and it has to be reduced. And people don't look at the landlord and the bank as the bad guy. They're just operating in the system that's been provided.
All right, Jake. Thank you for your call, Jake. Joe in Kitchener. Joe.
Hey, Rob. Good afternoon. Hey, do you remember playing the game Risk, the board game?
Risk. Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, we have an existential threat against the West, and it's coming from Russia, and it's coming from the Middle East right now, and I'm not even going to begin all the other names of the players. But right now we're sending a lot of foreign aid over there to mitigate those two threats against Western society and freedom. You can have Russian autocracy or you can have Sharia law. What would you prefer? So here's my point, Rob. Here's my point. Let's send every dollar we can over there to take those pieces off the board. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Yeah, because that's the most political way I can describe as to what's going on as we speak. But, people have a problem with that. And they don't understand. They can't put two and two together. Would you rather send the 4 tanks that we haven't cannibalized for parts, or the 8 jets that might work on any given day? How about some helicopters that might need a few parts?
Yeah, I think that was Dave's point in Calgary. It's about exerting influence. We don't have the same sort of military might that other countries do, and yet we have to show our face somehow Speaking of Ukraine, $5.4 billion last year. This is how we're doing it. I think that was Dave's point. I think it's partly your point as well, Joe. Have to run. More of your calls just ahead. The news is coming up. It's Talkback on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
I've been enjoying the discussion today about foreign aid, young people trying to buy houses as well. That's always an interesting one. The Canadian government spending $16 billion a year on foreign aid, international assistance. Your thoughts on that, on housing, trying to buy a house without help from your parents? What's that like? What's involved there? How are you doing it? How are you making it work? David, so every year there is a report to Parliament about foreign aid, how much we're spending in other countries.
Okay.
From Global Affairs, a report sent right to Parliament. I read the report. I read these reports so you don't have to, people.
You're a glutton for punishment.
Okay. Yeah. And you leaf through this report and you see the smiling face of the Minister of International Development, Mr. Hussein, and there's Melanie Joly, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland. And the report I read this way, it details all of the different government departments in Ottawa that get funding for what you would consider international assistance in any given year.
Right.
Now, some of them totally to be expected, others not so much. Global Affairs, for example, what used to be called International Affairs. Global Affairs, all those bureaucrats in the Lester B. Pearson building in Ottawa. $7 billion. Okay? Number one, of course. To be expected. Then the Department of Finance, $6.3 billion. You think the Department of Finance. Apparently, the Department of Finance is our international partner that works with organizations like the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, European Bank for Reconstruction, all of those places.
Right. Okay.
When they do business, they do business with the Department of Finance. IRCC, Immigration and Refugees Canada.
Well,
of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously.
Of course.
Obvious.
But then it lists all the other departments. And I just, why are these government departments getting foreign aid money?
Like what?
Like the Canada Revenue Agency.
The CRA?
The CRA.
Is getting foreign aid money?
$6 million.
Whose taxes are they doing?
Like, it's not, I'm not, look, the way this government spends money, $6 million, it blinks, $6 million is gone. But it's still, isn't that a head scratcher? Parks Canada.
Parks Canada?
Parks Canada.
It's right there in the name.
And there it is in the report. $780,000 in foreign aid.
For other parks in other countries, I guess?
I don't know. Parks Canada.
Sister parks?
Someone make it make sense. Canada Post.
Okay.
$440,000. Canada Post. $440,000 from foreign aid. I'm sure there's an explanation for it. Boy, I would love to hear it. Maybe it's, okay, they're trying to get their postal service modernized in some other country, and what maybe Canada Post helps them. I don't know. Canadian Museum of Nature. I mean, it's not a lot of money. It's only 10 grand or so, but you're like, why is the museum in Ottawa getting $1?
Yeah.
In foreign aid.
Yeah. Where is
I get it. It's
going?
Small potatoes in the grand scheme of things, but that's where some of it goes. Some of it. Okay. Let's get rid of Zol in Calgary.
We just lost Zul.
Okay. Who's up next here?
Mary in Kitchener.
Mary in Kitchener? Okay. Mary.
Oh, hi, Rob.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mary. On the foreign aid thing, yes. I don't know if that goes directly to the governments of the countries, but I want to share with you that, do you remember the tsunami on Sri Lanka, which is horrific,
I do.
On the 26th of December? I think it was 2005.
Okay.
Not sure. But it doesn't matter. Me, crazy woman, took a trip there.
You were there for that?
Year
oh
after.
My goodness!
And I thought I could hook up with the tour bus, but no, I had to hire my own driver for 21 days. But that's not the deal. He showed me all these people living in tents, and he told me the government takes 90% of the money.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not giving to Red Cross. I'm not giving to any of these things because the government takes it. You don't think 90% is an okay number, Rob?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, you said. Well, I'll give you another example. Okay, in just the last 2 years, Canada has sent more than $400 million to Haiti. Okay, and yet by most accounts, the country's in total chaos.
Right.
It's all over the news. Gangs are running the country, and there's barely a functioning government to speak of. And if you go back even further, back to 2010, you remember they had a terrible earthquake in Haiti.
Correct.
Canadian governments, both Liberal and Conservatives, have sent more than $2 billion to Haiti.
Yeah, but they send it to the government.
Right. And
that's
and
the
these
problem, Rob.
Right. Look at the state of things, right?
Well, but the government takes the lion's share. It is stupid to send money to the governments. That's what I'm trying to get at. So I refuse to give any money to the Red Cross. I don't give to UNICEF. I go to the Mennonite Central Committee, and I'll ask them, is someone going over there to give the money to the people?
Okay.
And that's the only people I will give money to.
That is very interesting,
Mary. The Red Cross is no good, and nor is UNICEF.
Okay, I don't know if the Red Cross is good or not. All right, Mary, we'll end our conversation there. And we'll stop here. Paul in Cambridge, you hang on. Charlie in Grey Highlands, and time to take your call as well before the top of the hour. We'll wrap things up for today. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Talk back on News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The phone's on the foreign aid issue we've been talking about today. Paul in Cambridge. Good to hear from you today, Paul. Go ahead.
A lot of people don't realize that this so-called foreign aid, in a lot of cases, isn't actually cash. It's credits. So the Canadian government gives country X $10 million in so-called foreign aid, but it's actually a credit. So you can use that $10 million to buy a specific product from a liberal-friendly company here in Canada. So a product that you might buy in your own country for $1 each, you're going to get $10 million in foreign aid, and you're going to take that money and you're going to buy that same product from a company probably in Quebec or something at $10 per unit instead. It's just a money laundering scheme where the money gets transferred from the Canadian taxpayer's wallet to a company in a liberal-friendly company someplace in Canada.
Is it the same when the Conservatives are in government?
In a lot of cases, yes. Foreign aid is just a way of laundering money, moving it around, making it look like you're doing something good, but it's taking it out of the taxpayer's pocket. Now, are Conservatives doing it too? In some respect, yes. However, the Liberals set the gold standard for corruption, for money laundering, for outright fraud.
Yeah, I don't know.
So they turn around, they give this company or this country $10 million, and out of that, the majority of the money comes back into Canada to some liberal-friendly company.
Like, for example,
who then turns around and makes a major donation.
So, I mean, how would this work? Like, let's take the second largest recipient of Canadian international assistance here is Nigeria. Okay, $277 million. So we send that money to Nigeria. How is that money coming back to Canada?
Let's see, what are they going to spend it on? Let's say they're going to spend it on a hydroelectric project in Nigeria to generate electricity. So what do? They buy.
Well, as one of our callers pointed out, it might be in the oil industry or the mining industry. Those are major industries in Nigeria.
Sure,
right? So,
but that money will turn around. They'll say, well, we're going to use it on this infrastructure project, and okay, that sounds good. Who's going to run the infrastructure program? Well, let's see. There's this company called SNC-Lavalin that operates around the world, and somehow I had to take an anti-corruption course one time at work because I dealt with their end users, end customers.
Right. Okay, yeah.
And one of the questions that I asked in the thing, going through all this different stuff, I says, how does SNC-Lavalin get away with it? Because they're up on corruption charges, paybacks and kickbacks and everything else around the world. And the guy laughed and he says, they got better lawyers than us. Well, and that's what it comes down to.
Well, SNC-Lavalin was blacklisted. Of course, it was blacklisted by the World Bank for corruption. Okay, Paul. Okay, that's your take. Thank you. Let's go to Charlie in Grey Highlands. Charlie. Hi, Charlie.
Morning, Rob. Rob, a house is a necessity of life. Does anyone know the cost of building a house? Now, when you buy a house from it's a real estate, it's 10 years old. That's a different thing. But today, a house, when you buy it and pick up the deed, there should be something there how much it costs to produce this house. The housing market is controlled by the big developers, the same way food prices are controlled by the rich grocers in Canada. By developers don't want a lot of houses on the market because it'll drop the price down. And there should be a government inquiry when we get a government. We haven't got a government now. I'm not going to say what they are, but what we got now anyway. There should be an inquiry into this. What goes into a house for somebody buys it? What it costs? The price of building materials.
Okay, what if that report shows that a significant percentage? I won't say most of the money, but a significant percentage. It was cited here today, say 30% of the cost of building a house is having to deal with government, the municipality, the development charges, the nonstop application process through the municipal bureaucracy and in inspections and environmental standards and studies and more studies that take, in some cases,
but the big developers
years.
Can't tell you. They won't tell anybody what goes into a house, Rob. I see houses built here just around the corner from me here. I got 50 acres of land here, and they're just waiting to grab a hold of it, and the rest of it around there. Across the highway, they bought it. They're buying, they buy $1 million, sounds like a lot of money for 50 acres. They can put 200 houses on 50 acres, so they can't blame it on the land, and they can't blame it on the municipalities. The municipalities are raising their prices to keep hydro and water and sewers and everything, but if that goes on the house, put it down. There should be an inquiry, and you should know what it costs. I mean, you take a cow today and take them to a butcher and get them butchered. It's $14.95 a pound for roast beef.
Okay, you kind of lost me there. All right. Okay, I'm not sure what the point was on the roast beef, but I have been looking at beef tenderloin prices because I do like that for a Thanksgiving dinner, but a little out of my price range this year, I'm afraid. We'll move along. Wrap things up. Talk back for today. Coming up with a couple of more calls. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
So we've been talking about a couple of things today. Young people trying to buy a home. What's that like if you're doing it without help from your parents? About 31% are getting help from their parents these days. And the average gift from parent to child nationwide, $167,000. I remember reporting on that figure when it first came out from CIBC Capital Markets. $167,000 gifted from parents to children to help children buy homes. In British Columbia, it's in excess of $200,000, like $204,000. And foreign aid has been a very popular topic today. Lots of people, lots of passionate opinions on that particular topic. I'm glad we could flush that out a bit. Mike in Calgary, some thoughts on that. Mike.
Yeah, just a question or just a response to your last gentleman there on the phone, and then we'll chat about foreign aid real quick. But, he said you can put 200 homes on his 50 acres of land and he sells it for $1 million. I think you also have to think about, though, what does the infrastructure look like? What does, the new septic system look like? What does the water system look like to get all that there? And I think that cost is really what's ballooning a lot of our communities and a lot of our cities. We're in Calgary, and we lost water here for a couple months this summer. And it was really challenging. And so I think we forget that to take that into account when it comes to the cost of, these developers and stuff like that building, because they have to get all the utilities to the houses. But what my comment was, or what my question was, is there a budget for foreign aid? Like, does the federal government have a budget and say, okay, this year we're going to spend $15 billion on foreign aid, and everybody votes on it and says, yeah, okay, this is what the number is? Because it seems like every time our prime minister goes to another country, he gives them $100 or $200 or $300 million. And, since he's been in power, I've always just said he's the yes man. Like he wants to say yes to everyone. So people look at him and say, oh, great, thank you so much, so on and so forth. But, is there any fiscal responsibility from our country when it comes to foreign aid and how we go about it? Or is it
foreign aid through global affairs is just one more department in the government, sir, and it has a budget that is allocated every year, and for the most recent period, it's international assistance. $16.5 billion is the latest figure that's been published. $16.5 billion.
And so I try and figure out where we're getting all that extra money from for it. There's a lot of good things, when there's a hurricane or something like that happens. And I understand what the gentleman, two people before me said, is, it goes to some sort of internal company organization. I don't know if I believe that. When you look at the U.S. and you look at NATO spending, they can give $50 billion to Ukraine because they're going to build all the bombs in the U.S. and the guns and everything else and the planes. And so they pay the companies within the U.S. to make sure that their NATO spending's enough, and then they ship it over there. But it's the U.S. economy that's really getting the benefit from a war because they're creating all the weapons.
Okay. On this $5.4 billion that is sent to Ukraine, what do you think of that number? I'm starting to hear more pushback. I'm not saying I question it, but a lot of Canadians are, well, I shouldn't say a lot. I'm hearing more often more people questioning the financial commitment there.
I think there's a lot of memes out on TikTok that show, Zelensky doing other professions and stuff like that in his past. And a lot of people think it's a scam. But if we don't have a federal government that's working for the benefit of Canadians to start with, or a government in general that's working for the benefit of Canadians, everyone's having a hard time right now making ends meet. So when we're giving away billions of dollars to other countries and they're questioning why we don't have clean water, why we don't have a lot of stuff, we don't really have a plan. We had a plan. We voted for the Liberals, or people voted for the Liberals. They said they had a plan to fix clean drinking water and do everything else, but they haven't executed on the plan. And you asked a question 2 days ago or yesterday that said, what should happen when one of the people in government doesn't do, I think the Prime Minister's
right. Because people wanted accountability. Yeah, people wanted accountability.
$500 is not accountability for anything.
Right. You're talking about a fine for violating the ethics laws, $500.
Right. So based
from the ethics commissioner who is appointed by the Prime Minister.
So if we have a federal government that, from an ethics perspective, is not following the basic ethic laws, then all of a sudden we're saying, hey, we're giving $5 billion to a second world country. People are going to question it, and people are not going to feel comfortable with it because there's too much corruption going on.
We're playing the music. We're both going to get cut off, so we have to stop talking now. The latest breaking news is coming up next. Another talk back tomorrow. More topics and your calls. This is News Radio.